So you may be interested in opening a bookstore, or you may just be genuinely curious about how bookstores choose which books to stock. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the different sources I use here at Spineless Reads to help us choose which books to include in our store. All right, guys, let's get to it. So the very first source, and probably one of the easiest, is to sell what you know. Sell what you love, sell what you read. And so a good example of that would be an indie author like Catherine Silva, who I've read and interacted with extensively over the last few years. I absolutely adore her fiction. So it's an easy sell for me to be able to recommend her books to my customers. Not only do I know the quality of her work, but I've already experienced her stories and can make an educated recommendation based off of a story that I really enjoyed. And you should be able to do the same thing with the books that you read and enjoy. Those are like prime candidates for high confident book sales. Books that you grew up reading, books that you currently read, books that you're really looking forward to reading based off of recommendations from other people in your world, other booksellers, other readers in your orbit that aren't necessarily customers, maybe friends, family, people that you trust. And so these are known titles, known authors. And to me, the highest confidence sales always come from a book that I've read before and really enjoyed. Another thing you can do is start with publishers that you already enjoy. You know their work, you know the quality of their work. And in this case, I work a lot with Tor Nightfire. I work a lot with Crooked Lane. I work a lot with Shortwave Publishing. These are publishers that I have high confidence in their titles. I know the quality of their work. I enjoy their stories, and their advanced reader copies help me review and read these stories before they're released. Gives me confidence that when the release date comes around, I can have their books stocked on my shelves and I can speak about them intelligently, right? So here's an example of some of the shortwave titles that have been on our shelves for, well, since the day we opened. And then, of course, I've got to give a shout out to So Below Books, my own press. I mean, should be confident enough to sell those, right? But the short story is, when you have a publisher that you already know intimately, you know their work, you know the quality of the work that they produce, and you know what types of books your readers will enjoy, you can recommend those titles very strongly. So you may be wondering, how do you find out about some of these publishers if you haven't had exposure to them? One way is to look at the books themselves when they've come into the shop and customers have been raving fans of these series. These are all Megan Quinn books that are published by Bloom. So I know that I can go to Bloom for more, right? Go back to the well for more titles and specifically look for what they're putting out. Berkeley does that a lot as well with Ali Hazelwood. I am not a romance reader, but I can look at these. Oh, look, there's more Berkeley, right? For Carly Fortune, right? There's more Bloom for Anna Huang. So you can tell that they've done the work. Your customers really like their books, and you can rely on that publisher to continue satisfying your customers. So that's another way you can become more familiar with publishers to shop. Now, another source is the industry, right? You can look at your Ingram iPage account and any of your distributors, whoever you're getting your books from, and they should be listing hot sale books, right? What are their bestsellers? What are they recommending for new releases? What are their highest performers over the last year? All of these platforms generally want to sell you their bestsellers, so they will list them. And there are other options as well. The Ingram Advance catalog is one of the sources that I use. And then I also use the American Booksellers Association's Indie Next recommendations pamphlet. Both of them are on the video here, and you can see, I'll just kind of flip through these so you can see what you're dealing with. But when you open these up, they list books by genre, they list some of them list books by publisher. Some of this is paid advertisements from those publishers. Others are just lists that are recommended by other booksellers. So just get familiar with these industry sources and use them as informants for potential titles for your bookstore. You've even got the Ingram iPage dashboard here that you can see. They will break it out by hardcover. They'll break it out by paperback. I have a lot of paperback readers, so I'm very interested in all new releases or best-selling paperbacks. And of course, you're always looking specifically at the genres that fit your identity or your theme of your store. You want to bring in titles that are relevant to your customers, not just whatever's selling. So I avoid the nonfiction titles because we're a fiction bookstore. All right, another great source is customer recommendations. I cannot tell you how important this was to us when we first opened. I asked every customer that came through our checkout line, what's a great book that you've recently read? What's a book that you would recommend to another reader that likes the genres you read? And captured all of those titles on a pad, a legal pad, right next to the checkout. And then I would go research those titles in the systems if I could get them, if their discount and their returnable rates or statuses were beneficial to the bookstore. I was going to bring in a few titles. What I started to notice was fans of a certain genre were recommending the same books as other fans of that genre. And so I knew I was onto titles that were strong performers in those specific niches, and our customers who hadn't experienced them yet could have high confidence that it would most likely be something that they would be interested in. 9 times out of 10, these customers that were getting a recommendation were familiar with the title, and they were like, oh yeah, that's right. You just reminded me, I need to get that one. I need to look at that. Or I already have that on my TBR. I'll crack into that one soon. But either way, that's beneficial to the customer. Like, you're just interested in making them happy. That's all. You don't need to necessarily make a recommendation that leads immediately to a sale. Most of the time that will happen, but some of the time that won't, and that's okay. You just want them to be happy. They're having a great experience with you. It's an excellent exchange whenever they know they can talk to someone they trust and they like about books. It's just a generally positive experience. Not to mention, the customers that are recommending the books love that you're asking for their opinion. And who doesn't want to share like their opinion about a great book that they've read? It's a really cool, it's like a mutually beneficial exchange. Now, another source is events, right? Event-specific selections. I've done a lot of book events where we have a specific lineup of authors present. So we buy the titles for those authors, and I interact with those authors directly and say, which titles would you like me to bring, and what quantity and format would you like those books in? Paperback or hardcover, and what would that number be? And they are normally receptive, and they've done several of these events, and they know exactly what they need, what they're asking for. I've worked with publishers who have had their authors at events, and the authors don't have a way to provide or sell the books. So they've asked us as a bookseller to do that for them. And in that case, I've had that publisher actually just ship me books. Other cases, they've asked me if I can get the books in time for the event. The answer is yes. And I go and order the books, and we try to carry a quantity that is favorable to the planner of the event, based either on ticket sales or expected audience size. And there is a risk associated with having overstock from an event like that, right? Like if you're going to have more books on hand than you necessarily will sell. That's not like the end of the world, because if you order them through the right sources, you can return overstock, and you can always bring those books back to your shop and sell them over time. And I'm just here to tell you that's normally my plan of action, is to just roll them, the excess from the events, into my inventory and then sell them over time, because I've already invested in them. I'm already familiar with the author. I've normally had the author sign the books in that case before I leave the event, if they're open to that. And that makes the books a little bit more attractive, obviously, to buyers in the shop. So always ask your authors at events, hey, would you mind signing the rest of the stock? I would like to sell it. My customers would love to have your signature in the book. Customers love that when they open them on the shelf and they're like, oh, this is signed. So always great to be able to do that for book events. Now, not all book events are created equal. This isn't just like author signings in your shop. That's one source. I do a lot of off-site book events. Sometimes you can work with other organizations in the area, like working with a university when they have guest authors, and you can be the bookseller, because a lot of universities are nonprofit. They can't profit from the sale of books. They don't normally buy books wholesale. They don't even have a means of doing it, so they need you as a partner to help with that. And then there's other times where it's just huge author events, special events like Horror Reader Weekend. I love doing those. We have like 35 horror authors and like 80 readers and influencers and guests all together for a whole weekend. And that is my top sales day of the year every time I do it. One other book event style sale opportunity that can help you determine what you want to carry is if you're going to go to themed conventions. I've done all types of conventions in the area. We have a very large convention center in Richmond, and they have very popular and highly attended book conventions, and conventions that aren't even book themed. Like we've done Comic-Cons, we've done horror themed, we've done sci-fi themed conventions, fantasy themed conventions, and we've stocked books specifically aligned to those audiences and done very well at those events because we're the only bookseller in the convention, or we're the only actual bookstore type where we have multiple titles from multiple authors, and they just eat that up. So everyone loves books. Everyone wants to see a bookseller at an event like that. And in those cases, I can look at the lineup, who's going to be at the event. Are there any famous authors going to be at the event, or movie stars or whatever? If it's aligned to those movies and there's actually like a line of books associated with it, definitely bring those. You're going to do well in sales if you can align your opportunities in a way that is favorable for the event, but also obviously favorable for the attendees. Another way to find strong performers, especially indie authors, is through interaction on social media. Now you can see how these people interact with other authors and their readers, and you can see what readers are saying about their books. They're sharing their titles, they're sharing their cover art. You can get to know these authors. This is not like a one-way street. You don't have to hide, right? And by being immersed in the environment and in the community that you serve, both as a bookseller and as a book buyer, you really get to know people. I have sold so many indie titles that I met people online before they were in a traditional publishing deal, or I met them at events. But we all started or stayed in touch through social media. And no matter how much you love or hate social media, it is an outstanding way for you to support indie artists, indie authors in particular. And I know that the field feels like flush, right? Like there's just an overwhelming amount of indie authors out there talking about their books. As a member of a community, you'll see the names that kind of emerge as the ones that you can have high confidence in working with. And there are several authors that I constantly stock their books, like Vicky Parhampton and Emma Murray and Coy Hall and Andrew K. Clark and Kat Silva that I shared before, and the list goes on and on. These are all authors that I met through the horror community as an author and as a reader. And so if you get into these communities, you'll find certain podcasts or book reviewers that you learn to trust, and you can confidently take the titles that they've reviewed and determine whether they're good for your site or not, or for your business or not. So I like to stay in touch with book reviewers, and some of these, like a handful. Don't overwhelm yourself. Pick a handful of really good review sites or social media personalities that give honest reviews about their books, and determine whether those titles are strong candidates for your shop. My last point about indies is that it's about quality. It always is about quality. Readers don't really necessarily care if it's an indie author or a traditionally published author, as long as they can't really tell when they see the books. I mean, you have so many indie authors out there doing a great job of cover design, and their editing is professional, and they're not cutting corners. They're producing professional books. And you can find those books and you can incorporate them into your store's inventory. And here at Spineless Reads, we have like a coffee table in the middle of our shop, and we put a lot of our local authors on this coffee table. I've already opened these books and talked to these authors, and not all of these are indies, but the vast majority of these are local indies. And I know that they're good people. I know what their process was for writing the book and obtaining cover art. And so I know I can trust that I can give this book to my customers, and it's not going to be AI slop, and that the covers were done by an artist, and that regardless of whether it's an indie book or a traditionally published book, it has the quality required to keep my customers happy. And that's really what it's all about. And I've met most of these local authors right here at the store. They've come right in and they've wanted to meet with me and talk with me about their books. And you just can't go wrong with that type of interaction. To kind of wrap things up, I want to put a very important note here at the end. It's not about where you get your books from necessarily. It's more about what you're getting, right? So no matter where I'm sourcing my books, I'm always looking at the same things. I'm looking for books that are either new releases or strong performers. It doesn't matter to me if the book was published 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or 20 days ago, as long as it's a strong performer. Now, it's kind of hard to say a new book is a strong performer if it's not on the bestseller list, right? So how do we make that determination? I'm looking at things that are very strongly aligned to the community that's shopping in my bookstore. Great cover art, title, author recognition, all of those things. So even if that book hasn't hit a bestsellers list, because not all books can, and even if that book isn't necessarily something that's been recommended to you or requested on pre-orders, I'm looking at those books in like the Advance or in the Indie Next or on any of my dashboards where I'm buying books. And I'm hunting for titles that I see have the high potential to keep my customers happy. So strong performers are books that are already out in the market, that already have a track record. They've probably fallen away from the bestseller list, but they're tried and true. And a good example of that for me, like in my horror section, would be something like Tender is the Flesh. I sell tons of copies of Tender is the Flesh. It is always requested. I keep it in stock all the time. It's not like flying off the shelf nonstop, but it is a steady seller. I have zero risk of having overstock of Tender is the Flesh. And it's not on any of the top bestseller lists right now because it's past its initial launch period. So that's just a good example of how I'm looking at strong performance with my shop versus just the bestseller lists. Another way to look at strong performers are known names, like let's just use a big one like Stephen King or Nora Roberts, C.J. Box, Stephen Graham Jones, Brandon Sanderson. These names have industry recognition. Tanana Reeve Dew, Terry Pratchett. I've got these are just go-to. I know they're going to sell. Sarah J. Maas, the typical industry sellers. No matter what they publish, there's going to be an audience for them. I'm happy to bring those in. The moral of the story there is quality in strong performance is a big thing, right? I want those books to go into audiences that I know will sell. So even if a Brandon Sanderson book is going to sit on my shelf for a couple months, it'll eventually move. And I'm not really worried about it. It's just more about when I'm going to recoup my investment in that title, right? Same with Stephen King. Stephen King has written so many books. No matter which of his books I bring in, they'll eventually sell. And I've had some King titles that have sat on my shelf and haven't moved in months, but eventually they will. I'm not worried about it because Stephen King sells a lot of books. So there you have it, guys. That's how we choose our books here at Spineless Reads. I hope this was helpful to you. If you have other sources that you use at your bookstore or that you found, please mention them in the comments below. I'd love to learn about them. I'd love to hear about them. This list is not all-inclusive, but it is comprehensive. And I really appreciate you guys checking out the channel. Make sure you guys like and subscribe this video, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.